The bass pounded through my chest like a second heartbeat, each thump making my ribs vibrate in a way that should have been uncomfortable but somehow felt necessary. I pressed myself deeper into the velvet booth of Eclipse, the city's most exclusive nightclub, watching bodies move on the dance floor through a haze of expensive perfume and desperation. My best friend Maya had dragged me here an hour ago, insisting that 3 weeks was long enough to mourn a relationship that had ended with my ex-boyfriend sleeping with my roommate in our bed. I took another sip of my third Cosmopolitan, the vodka burning a familiar path down my throat. The playlist had shifted to something darker, more sensual, and the crowd responded accordingly. Maya was somewhere out there, her red dress a flash of crimson among the sea of black and gold, but I'd lost track of her 20 minutes ago. She had a talent for disappearing with attractive strangers, a skill I'd never quite mastered, despite her attempts to teach me. My phone buzzed in my clutch. Another text from HR confirming my start date at Stone Industries next Monday. Executive assistant to the CEO. The job was a miracle, honestly, considering I'd been fired from my previous position for accidentally CCing the entire company on an email, calling my former boss a micromanaging tyrant. The tyrant part had been accurate, but perhaps not email appropriate. I should have been home, preparing. Reading up on Gabriel Stone, the notoriously private CEO who'd built his empire from nothing and now controlled half the city's real estate and import business. But Maya had pointed out, quite reasonably, that I had all weekend to stress about my new job. Tonight was for forgetting that Brian had chosen my roommate over me, that I was 28 and starting over again, that my life seemed to be an endless series of false starts and dramatic endings. The stranger appeared without warning, sliding into the booth beside me with the kind of confidence that suggested he'd never been told no in his life. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell his cologne, something dark and expensive with notes of cedar and spice. When I turned to tell him the seat was taken, the words died on my lips. He was beautiful in a way that seemed almost dangerous. Sharp jawline, high cheekbones, dark hair that fell just slightly over his forehead, despite being styled back. But it was his eyes that held me frozen. They were gray, like storm clouds before lightning strikes, and they were fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You look like you're either planning a murder or contemplating your own demise," he said, his voice a low rumble that somehow carried over the music. "I'm hoping it's the former. The latter would be a waste." I should have been offended by his presumption, by the way he'd just inserted himself into my space without invitation. Instead, I found myself smiling, something reckless unfurling in my chest. Murder. Definitely murder. My ex-boyfriend and my former roommate. I'm still working out the details. Smart to plan thoroughly. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been approval. Need an alibi? I'm told I'm quite convincing. Are you offering to help me commit murder or just cover it up? Whichever requires less cleanup. He signaled the bartender with a gesture so subtle I almost missed it. Seconds later, 2 glasses of something amber appeared on the table. "You seem like you could use something stronger than whatever pink drink you're nursing." I looked down at my Cosmopolitan, then back at him. "What makes you think I want to drink with you? You could be a serial killer." "I could be." He pushed one of the glasses toward me. "But serial killers rarely offer expensive whiskey to their victims. Too memorable. Better to stick with something common, forgettable." Against every ounce of common sense I possessed, I picked up the glass. The whiskey was smooth, probably worth more than my rent, and it burned in the best way. "You've clearly thought about this." "I think about everything." His eyes never left mine. It's a blessing and a curse. We fell into conversation with an ease that should have been impossible between strangers. He didn't ask my name, and I didn't offer it. There was something liberating about the anonymity, about being just 2 people in a dark club without the weight of context or expectations. He was sharp, witty in a way that felt almost cruel, and he matched my sarcasm beat for beat. An hour passed. Maybe more. The club grew more crowded, the music louder, and somehow we'd migrated closer together in the booth. His arm rested on the seat behind me, not quite touching, but close enough that I could feel it. When he laughed at something I said, really laughed, I felt an unfamiliar surge of pride. "Dance with me," he said suddenly, standing and offering his hand. I hesitated. Dancing meant touching, and touching meant crossing a line I wasn't sure I should cross with a stranger whose name I didn't know. But his hand remained extended, patient, and the challenge in his eyes made my decision for me. The dance floor was packed, bodies pressed together in the manufactured intimacy of a club at midnight. He pulled me close, one hand settling on my waist, the other still holding mine. We moved together, and I was surprised to find he actually knew how to dance. Not the grinding pretense that passed for dancing in most clubs, but real dancing, leading me through the crowd with practiced ease. "You're full of surprises," I said, having to lean close to his ear to be heard over the music. "You have no idea." His breath was warm against my neck, sending shivers down my spine. "Neither are you what I expected when I walked in tonight." "What did you expect?" "Not you." His hand tightened on my waist, pulling me flush against him. "Never you." The song changed, something slower, more deliberate. The crowd around us seemed to fade, leaving just the two of us moving in the dim light. His eyes held mine, and I saw something flicker in their depths. Heat, yes, but something else too. Something that looked almost like recognition, though that was impossible. We were strangers. "This is insane," I whispered. "Completely." But he didn't pull away. If anything, he drew closer, his forehead almost touching mine. "I should leave. Walk away right now." "Why don't you?" "Because you're looking at me like you want me to stay." His voice dropped even lower. "Like you want me to do something incredibly stupid." My heart was racing. Alcohol and attraction, and 3 weeks of feeling unwanted combining into something reckless and dangerous. "Maybe I do." He kissed me. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was claiming, possessive. His hand moving to the back of my neck to hold me exactly where he wanted me. I responded without thinking, my fingers fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. He tasted like whiskey and something darker, addictive in a way that should have sent me running. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were nearly black. "Come home with me." Every rational thought I possessed screamed that this was a terrible idea. I didn't know his name, didn't know anything about him except that he kissed like sin and looked at me like I was something precious and dangerous all at once. "No," I said, surprising myself with the word. "I can't." Something flashed across his face. Disappointment, maybe, or respect. "Why not?" "Because I have a job interview Monday," I said, the lie coming easily. It wasn't technically a lie, just not the complete truth. "And I need to not show up hungover and wrecked from a night with a stranger whose name I don't even know." "Gabriel," he said after a pause. "My name is Gabriel. Grace." The admission felt like giving up something important. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb tracing my lower lip. "Grace, it suits you." He leaned in, pressing one more kiss to my forehead that felt somehow more intimate than the one we'd just shared. "Go home, Grace. Prepare for your interview, but know that I'll be thinking about you. You don't even know me. I know enough." He stepped back, putting distance between us that felt like a physical ache. "I know you're running from something. I know you're stronger than you think you are, and I know that kiss was the best and worst thing that's happened to me in a very long time." Before I could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the crowd like he'd never been there at all. I stood on the dance floor, my lips still tingling, my heart racing, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life or dodged a bullet. Maya found me 10 minutes later, her lipstick smeared and her eyes bright. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere. Ready to go?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. As we made our way to the exit, I glanced back one more time, half hoping to see him again. But the crowd had swallowed him completely. The Uber ride home was quiet, Maya chattering about the guy she'd been dancing with while I stared out the window and tried not to think about storm gray eyes and a kiss that had felt like a promise and a threat all at once. It was only when I was finally in my apartment, washing my face and preparing for bed, that I let myself fully process what had happened. I'd kissed a stranger, more than kissed him. I'd wanted to leave with him, to do something completely out of character and potentially stupid. But I hadn't. I'd walked away, chosen responsibility over recklessness for once in my life. As I climbed into bed, I told myself that was the end of it. Gabriel, whoever he was, would remain a beautiful memory. A what-if that I'd occasionally think about but never pursue. I had no idea how catastrophically wrong I was. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of a death sentence. I stood outside Stone Industries headquarters, a gleaming 60-story tower of glass and steel that screamed money and power, and tried to calm my racing heart. My new charcoal suit felt too tight, my heels too high, my entire existence too small for the massive building looming before me. The lobby was all marble and modern art, with a reception desk that looked like it cost more than my car. The woman behind it was impeccably dressed, her smile professional, as she directed me to the executive floor. "Mr. Stone is expecting you," she said, handing me a visitor badge. 62nd floor. Helen, his current assistant, will meet you there. The elevator ride felt endless, my reflection in the polished doors showing a woman who looked far more composed than she felt. When the doors finally opened, I was greeted by an elegant woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a kind smile. "Grace Mitchell?" She extended her hand. "I'm Helen Reeves. I'll be training you this week before I retire. Mr. Stone is very particular about how things are done, but I'm sure you'll do wonderfully." I followed her through a maze of corridors, trying to absorb her rapid-fire instructions about filing systems and coffee preferences and meeting protocols. We stopped outside a set of imposing double doors. "He's just finishing a call," Helen said, checking her watch. "He likes his coffee black, no sugar, at exactly 8:30. He prefers printed reports to digital. Never interrupt him when he's on the phone unless it's an emergency. And his definition of emergency is very narrow. And Grace?" She paused, her expression almost sympathetic. "Don't take it personally when he's short with you. He's like that with everyone." Before I could ask what she meant, the doors opened, and my entire world tilted. Because standing there, in an immaculate charcoal suit with his dark hair styled back, and those impossible gray eyes fixed on me with an expression I couldn't read, was Gabriel. Not just Gabriel. Gabriel Stone, my new boss, the CEO of Stone Industries, the man I'd kissed 3 nights ago in a club, whose lips I could still feel on mine, whose name I'd whispered in the dark. For a moment, neither of us moved. Helen was saying something, making introductions, but I couldn't hear her over the rushing in my ears. "Mr. Stone, this is Grace Mitchell, your new executive assistant." His eyes never left mine as he extended his hand. "Miss Mitchell, welcome to Stone Industries." I stared at his offered hand, then back at his face, searching for any hint that this was affecting him the way it was affecting me. But his expression was perfectly controlled, professionally distant, giving nothing away. This couldn't be happening. This was not happening. But as I forced my hand into his, feeling that same electric shock I'd felt Friday night, I knew with absolute certainty that my life had just become infinitely more complicated. "Thank you, Mr. Stone," I managed, my voice somehow steady despite the chaos in my head. "I'm looking forward to working with you." His grip tightened fractionally, and something dark flashed in his eyes. "I'm sure we'll work very well together, Miss Mitchell. Very well indeed." And as Helen led me away to show me my desk, I felt Gabriel's gaze burning into my back, heavy with promise and threat, and something that felt dangerously close to possession. I was so screwed. The first day was a masterclass in humiliation. Helen showed me to my desk, a sleek workspace directly outside Gabriel's office, with a view of the city that probably cost more in rent than my entire apartment. Everything was organized with military precision, pens arranged by color and size, files labeled in perfect alphabetical order, a computer with 17 different color-coded folders that apparently corresponded to different aspects of Gabriel's schedule. "He's very particular," Helen said again, and I was starting to understand this was her polite way of saying he was an absolute control freak. "This folder is for morning meetings, this one for afternoon, this one for international calls which must be scheduled around time zones he's specified here." My head was spinning. I'd worked as an assistant before, but never for someone who apparently needed their entire existence micromanaged down to the minute. The intercom on my desk buzzed. "Miss Mitchell, my office, now." Helen gave me an encouraging smile that did nothing to calm my racing heart. "Just remember, he's all bark. Mostly." I smoothed down my skirt and walked the 10 feet to his door, knocking once before entering. Gabriel sat behind a massive desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black marble. The office was enormous, decorated in shades of charcoal and steel, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Everything about it screamed power, control, intimidacy. He didn't look up from the document he was reading. "Close the door." I did, my hand trembling slightly on the handle. When I turned back, he was watching me with those gray eyes that had haunted me all weekend. "We need to establish some ground rules," he said, his voice cold and professional. Nothing like the warm rumble I remembered from Friday night. "What happened at Eclipse was a mistake. It will not be mentioned, referenced, or acknowledged in any way while you're working here. Is that understood?" The dismissal stung more than it should have. "Perfectly understood, Mr. Stone." "Good." He turned his attention back to his document. "I expect my coffee at 8:30 precisely. Black, no sugar, 180 degrees, not 175, not 185. There's a thermometer in the break room. Learn to use it." I stared at him. "You want me to take the temperature of your coffee?" "I want you to follow instructions without commentary." His eyes flicked up to meet mine, cold and assessing. "Can you do that, Miss Mitchell? Or do we need to have a conversation about whether this position is right for you?" Every instinct I had screamed at me to tell him exactly where he could shove his temperature-specific coffee. But I needed this job. Needed the salary, the benefits, the chance to rebuild my life after the disaster with Brian. "I can follow instructions, Mr. Stone." "Excellent." He slid a stack of files across the desk. "These need to be organized by date, then cross-referenced with the digital files in folder 7B. I need it done by noon." I picked up the stack. There had to be at least 100 documents, and glanced at the clock. It was 9:15. "All of this by noon? Is there a problem?" The challenge in his voice was clear. "No problem at all." I hefted the files and turned toward the door. "Miss Mitchell?" I paused, looking back. His expression was unreadable. "Try not to spill coffee on anything important. I've heard you have a talent for that." The fact that he'd clearly researched me, knew about the incident at my last job, should have been expected. But hearing him reference it felt like a slap. "I'll do my best, Mr. Stone." Back at my desk, I stared at the mountain of files and felt the first stirrings of real anger. He was testing me, pushing to see if I'd break or walk out. The realization made my spine straighten. I'd been pushed around by men before. Brian, my father, my previous boss. I wasn't about to let Gabriel Stone join that list, no matter how good a kisser he was. I dove into the work with grim determination. The files were a mess, deliberately so I suspected. Dates were out of order, documents were misfiled, and the cross-referencing system made no logical sense. But I'd always been good at finding patterns in chaos, at making order from disaster. By 11:30, I'd finished. I carried the reorganized files back to Gabriel's office and knocked. Enter. He was on a call, speaking rapid Italian to someone on the other end. I set the files on his desk and turned to leave, but he held up one finger, gesturing for me to wait. I stood there, trying not to listen but unable to help it. His Italian was flawless, his tone commanding, and I caught enough words to understand he was discussing some kind of shipment and delivery schedules. Import business, I remembered from my research. Stone Industries had started in imports. When he finally ended the call, he pulled the files toward him and began flipping through them. I watched his expression, looking for any reaction, but his face remained impassive. You reorganized the entire system, he said finally. You said to organize them. The existing system was inefficient. I created a new one that makes more sense. His eyes lifted to mine, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker there. Surprise, maybe. Or approval. You were supposed to follow the existing system. You said to organize and cross-reference. You didn't specify I had to use a system that made no sense. We stared at each other across the desk, tension crackling in the air between us. His jaw tightened, and I braced myself for an explosion. Instead, he leaned back in his chair. The new system is better. Use it going forward. The admission shocked me more than anger would have. Thank you. Don't let it go to your head. But there was something almost like amusement in his voice. My coffee. You're late. I glanced at the clock. 8:37. I'll get it right now. Don't bother. It's past the acceptable window. He returned his attention to the files, effectively dismissing me. Tomorrow, be on time. Back at my desk, I fought the urge to scream. He was impossible, controlling, and apparently incapable of any flexibility whatsoever. The man I'd kissed Friday night had seemed dangerous, but human. This version was carved from ice. The rest of the day followed the same pattern. He was exacting, demanding, critical of everything I did. Too slow with messages, too fast when taking notes. My handwriting was illegible, even though I could read it perfectly fine. I'd organized his afternoon meetings wrong, even though I'd followed Helen's instructions exactly. By 5 o'clock, I was ready to quit. I was packing up my desk when his door opened. Miss Mitchell, a word. I followed him back into his office, exhaustion making me reckless. If this is another critique of my filing system, it's not. He moved to the windows, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city. You did well today, better than I expected. The praise was so unexpected I almost didn't process it. You have a strange way of showing appreciation. I don't believe in coddling my employees. He turned to face me, and in the dying light of the afternoon, he looked less like the cold CEO and more like the man from the club. But I do believe in acknowledging competence. You're competent, Miss Mitchell. Chaotic, disorganized in your personal habits, and you have an unfortunate tendency toward sarcasm, but competent. How do you know I'm disorganized in my personal habits? His smile was sharp. Your purse fell open when you set it down this morning. I could see wadded receipts, at least 3 different lip glosses, and what looked like a grocery list from 2 weeks ago. Heat crept up my neck. Most people would consider that snooping. I consider it observation. There's a difference. He moved closer, and I forced myself not to step back. I need to know everything about the people who work for me, Miss Mitchell, especially those who have access to my private schedule, my meetings, my life. Then you should know I hate being micromanaged. And you should know I don't care. But his voice had lost some of its edge. We're going to have to find a way to work together, Grace. The use of my first name sent a jolt through me. I thought we weren't acknowledging what happened Friday. We're not, in public. He was close enough now that I could smell his cologne, see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw. But when it's just us, in this office, I'm not going to pretend I don't remember how you tasted. My breath caught. Mr. Stone. Gabriel. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb tracing my lower lip exactly the way he had on the dance floor. When we're alone, call me Gabriel. I should have pulled away, should have reminded him about professional boundaries and workplace harassment policies. Instead, I stood frozen as he leaned in, his lips hovering just above mine. This is a terrible idea, I whispered. The worst. But he didn't move away. You work for me. I'm your boss. Getting involved would be complicated and messy, and potentially disastrous for both of us. Then why? Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. His voice was rough, almost angry. Because that kiss ruined me for anyone else. Because you walked into my office this morning and I wanted to clear my desk and take you right there, consequences be damned. The confession sent heat pooling in my stomach. Gabriel. His phone rang, shattering the moment. He stepped back abruptly, his professional mask slamming back into place as he answered. Stone. I didn't wait to hear the rest of the conversation. I fled to my desk, grabbed my purse, and practically ran to the elevator. In the safety of the descending car, I pressed my hand to my racing heart and tried to process what had just happened. Gabriel Stone wanted me. My boss, the man who'd spent all day criticizing everything I did, wanted me. This was going to be a disaster. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Don't be late with my coffee. GS. Despite everything, I smiled. If you wanted to play this game, fine. I could play too. I just hoped neither of us got burned in the process. The next 2 weeks were a carefully choreographed dance between professionalism and something far more dangerous. By day, Gabriel was my exacting, impossible boss. He criticized the way I answered phones, the font I used in emails, the fact that I brought a travel mug of coffee to my desk instead of using the company-provided cups. Once, he actually reorganized my desk while I was at lunch, arranging everything in perfect right angles that I deliberately messed up the next morning just to see the vein in his temple throb. But after 5 o'clock, when the office emptied and it was just us in that glass tower above the city, something shifted. He'd call me into his office for one more thing, and we'd end up talking for hours, about everything and nothing. I learned he'd grown up in Brooklyn, that his grandfather had started the import business with nothing but a single shipping container and an iron will, that his favorite food was his grandmother's carbonara, which he could never quite replicate, that he played piano when he needed to think, that he'd been engaged once and called it off 2 weeks before the wedding. I told him things I'd never told anyone. About my father's disappointment when I'd chosen English literature over business school. About the novel I'd been writing for 3 years but was too afraid to show anyone. About how Brian had made me feel small, constantly criticizing my chaos while presenting himself as the stable, organized one. He was intimidated by you, Gabriel said one evening, both of us sitting on the leather couch in his office, the city lights spreading below us like fallen stars. We'd ordered Chinese food, something he claimed never to do but had suggested himself, and were eating straight from the containers. Intimidated? By me? I laughed, nearly choking on a piece of orange chicken. Brian was a corporate attorney. I was a disorganized mess who got fired for sending an inappropriate email. You got fired for telling the truth. Gabriel set down his container, his expression serious. And yes, intimidated. Men like him need to feel superior to their partners. They choose women with potential, then spend their entire relationship trying to diminish that potential so they can remain on top. The insight was so accurate it stole my breath. Is that why you're so controlling? Trying to keep me diminished? I'm controlling because I have to be. He picked up a fortune cookie, cracking it open with deliberate precision. My world doesn't allow for chaos, Grace. Everything has to be ordered, planned, executed perfectly. One mistake, one moment of carelessness, and everything falls apart. That sounds exhausting. It is. He pulled out the fortune and read it, his mouth quirking. You will find happiness in unexpected places. What does yours say? I reached for my own cookie. He held it up. A beautiful stranger will change your life. Our eyes met, and the air between us crackled with unspoken tension. This had become our pattern. Moments of connection followed by careful retreat, professional distance during the day dissolving into something dangerously intimate at night. But we never crossed the line. Never touched beyond the accidental brush of fingers. Never acknowledged that we were playing with fire that would eventually burn us both. Until the night everything changed. It was a Thursday, nearly 8 o'clock. I'd stayed late to prepare materials for Gabriel's meeting with a potential new client, some international investor interested in Stone Industries' import division. The office was quiet except for the soft click of my keyboard and the occasional rustle of papers from Gabriel's office. I was printing the final contract when I heard voices. Raised, angry voices in Italian coming from Gabriel's office. My Italian was rudimentary at best, learned from a semester abroad in college, but I caught enough words to make my blood run cold. Shipment, customs, missing, and worst of all, Castano. I'd heard that name before, whispered in the break room when people thought I wasn't listening. The Castano family was one of the city's oldest crime families, their influence reaching into everything from construction to the docks. The door to Gabriel's office flew open, and a man I didn't recognize stormed out. He was older, maybe 60, with silver-streaked dark hair and cold eyes that swept over me dismissively before he disappeared into the elevator. Gabriel appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened, his normally perfect hair disheveled. He looked furious and something else, worried, which I'd never seen before. Who was that? I asked, standing. No one. Go home, Grace. Gabriel. I said go home. His voice was sharp, cutting, and I saw his hand tremble slightly before he shoved it into his pocket. This doesn't concern you. Pride warred with concern. If it affects you, it affects me. I'm your assistant. I should know. You're my employee. He moved closer, his expression hardening into the cold mask I'd learned to hate. You should know only what I tell you to know. Nothing more. The dismissal stung. After 2 weeks of late-night conversations and shared fortune cookies, he was throwing up walls again, shutting me out. Fine. I grabbed my purse, anger making my movements jerky. I'll go home and leave you to whatever shady business you're conducting with. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist. Not painfully, but firmly enough to stop me. Be very careful what you say next, Grace. I looked down at his hand, then back at his face. Or what? You'll fire me? Go ahead. I'm getting tired of working for someone who treats me like I'm competent 1 minute and disposable the next. You're not disposable. His grip loosened but didn't release. He stopped, jaw clenching. You don't understand what you're asking me to share. Then explain it to me. For a long moment we stood there, his hand still circling my wrist, my pulse hammering against his fingers. I could see the war happening behind his eyes, the desire to trust me battling against years of keeping secrets. Finally, he released me and stepped back. My family's import business wasn't always entirely legal. The admission hung in the air between us. I should have been shocked, should have grabbed my purse and run. Instead, I stayed rooted in place. We've been legitimate for 5 years now. Every shipment, every container, every transaction, all legal, all documented, all clean. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. But my grandfather built this company on relationships with people who weren't interested in following the law. People like the Castanos. And they want you to go back to the old ways. They want me to help them with a shipment that would bypass customs. He turned away, moving to the windows. Weapons, probably, or worse. I refused, obviously, but the Castanos don't take no for an answer easily. My mind was racing. That man who just left. Marco Castano. His son Vincent is the one who approached me with the proposal. Gabriel's reflection in the window looked haunted. They're putting pressure on me, threatening to expose deals my grandfather made decades ago. Things that could bring down everything I've built, ruin reputations of families who've gone legitimate like we did. I moved to stand beside him, our reflection side by side in the glass. What are you going to do? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him something. I've spent 5 years building a legitimate empire. I won't go back to that world, Grace. I can't. But if they push hard enough, if they threaten the right people. He stopped, shaking his head. Without thinking, I reached for his hand. His fingers closed around mine immediately, desperately, like I was an anchor in a storm. You're not alone in this, I said quietly. You should run from me. He turned to face me fully, his eyes dark with something that looked like self-loathing. I'm exactly the kind of man your mother warned you about. Dangerous, connected to things that could destroy you just by association. My mother warned me about a lot of things. I rarely listened. Despite everything, he smiled. I've noticed. We stood there, hands linked, the weight of his confession settling between us. I should have been terrified. Should have walked away from him and his dangerous connections and his impossible situation. Instead, I stepped closer. I'm not running. Grace, I'm chaotic and disorganized, and I spill coffee on important documents. You're controlling and impossible, and you organize pens by size. I lifted my free hand to his face, feeling the rough stubble beneath my palm. But I'm not running from you. Whatever this is between us, whatever happens with the Castanos, I'm not running. His hand came up to cover mine, pressing my palm more firmly against his cheek. You should be. Probably. I smiled. Add it to the long list of things I should do but don't. He pulled me against him then, his arms coming around me in an embrace that felt less like desire and more like desperate need. I wrapped my arms around his waist, feeling the tension in his body, the barely controlled fear he'd never admit to. We'll figure this out, I murmured against his chest. Together. Together. He repeated the word like he was testing it, seeing how it felt. Then softer, almost vulnerable. I've never had a together before. Well, you do now. I pulled back enough to look at him. And fair warning, my togethers are messy and chaotic and involve a lot of half-finished plans and improvisation. Sounds perfect. His thumb traced my cheekbone. I'm very good at improvisation when I need to be. Liar, you literally schedule your improvisations. He laughed, the sound surprising both of us. Only sometimes. The moment stretched, comfortable and terrifying all at once. Then his phone rang, shattering our bubble. He checked the screen and his expression hardened. I need to take this. I nodded, stepping back to give him space. But before I could move too far, he caught my hand again. Grace? Thank you. For staying. For... He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. For being you. You're welcome. I squeezed his hand once before releasing it. Now go be the scary CEO who makes people tremble. I'll be at my desk making a mess of your color-coded filing system. Touch my files and you're fired. You can't fire me. I'm the only one who knows how you take your coffee. His smile was genuine, transforming his face into something breathtaking. 181 degrees. You've been making it too hot for 2 weeks. I know. I grinned. I've been doing it on purpose to see if you'd notice. Of course I noticed. I notice everything about you. The admission sent warmth flooding through me. As I walked back to my desk, I could feel his eyes following me, heavy with promise and concern, and something that might have been hope. Whatever was happening between us, whatever danger the Castanos represented, we were in it together now. And somehow, that made everything feel possible. The Castano problem didn't go away. If anything, it intensified. Over the next week, I watched Gabriel transform into someone I barely recognized. The man who'd held me in his office, who'd admitted to never having a together before, disappeared behind layers of cold calculation and controlled fury. He arrived earlier, stayed later, took calls in Italian that ended with him gripping his phone so hard I thought it might shatter. I did what I could. Organized his schedule to maximize efficiency, screened calls from numbers I'd learned to recognize as Castano associates, brought him food he wouldn't eat, and coffee he'd drink cold hours later. But mostly, I just stayed. Worked late beside him in companionable silence, a reminder that he wasn't facing this alone. It was during one of these late nights that she appeared. I was at my desk, reviewing contracts for tomorrow's meeting, when the elevator doors opened and a woman stepped out. She was stunning, the kind of beautiful that made other women instinctively check their reflection. Tall, with honey blonde hair that fell in perfect waves, wearing a cream dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "I'm here to see Gabriel," she said, her voice carrying a faint Italian accent that made his name sound musical. She didn't ask if he was available, didn't check in with me, just walked straight toward his office like she owned it. "Excuse me, Mr. Stone is in a meeting." I stood, moving to intercept her. She turned, and her green eyes swept over me with the kind of dismissive assessment that made me feel instantly small. "And you are?" "Grace Mitchell, Mr. Stone's executive assistant." I kept my voice professional despite the irritation rising in my chest. "If you'd like to schedule an appointment, how charming." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Gabriel has his little secretary trained well, but I don't need an appointment, darling. I'm Isabella Marchesi." She said the name like I should recognize it, and when I didn't react, something like satisfaction flickered across her face. "The Isabella he was engaged to," she clarified, "though I suppose he wouldn't mention me to the help." Before I could form a response, something cutting about being called the help, Gabriel's door opened. He froze in the doorway, his expression cycling through surprise, displeasure, and finally settling on cold politeness. "Isabella, this is unexpected." "Is it?" She moved toward him with practiced grace, reaching up to kiss both his cheeks in that European way that seemed far too intimate for ex-fiancés. "Papa said you'd been asking questions about the Castanos. I thought I should come, offer my assistance." My stomach dropped. Her father was connected to the Castanos. Of course he was. "I appreciate the concern, but it's not necessary." Gabriel's voice was controlled, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "How did you know I was here this late?" "I know everything about you, Caro." Her hand rested on his arm, proprietary and familiar. "Some things don't change just because we're no longer together." I should have gone back to my desk, given them privacy. Instead, I stood there, watching her touch him, feeling something hot and possessive coil in my chest. Gabriel's eyes found mine over Isabella's shoulder, and something passed between us. A question, maybe, or an apology. "Miss Mitchell, you can go home," he said. "I'll handle things from here." The dismissal stung more than it should have. "Of course. I'll see you tomorrow, Mr. Stone." I grabbed my purse and made it to the elevator before the first tears of frustration threatened. I wasn't crying over him. I refused to cry over any man ever again after Brian. But the casual way he'd dismissed me, the way Isabella had looked at me like I was nothing, the reminder that I was just his employee while she was someone from his world, his past, someone who belonged in ways I never could. The elevator doors were closing when a hand shot between them. Gabriel stepped inside, his expression fierce. "You're not leaving like this. You told me to go home." "I told you that so she wouldn't—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Grace, Isabella showing up was not planned. I didn't know she was coming. It doesn't matter." I crossed my arms, staring at the descending floor numbers. "You have history with her. Her father has connections to the Castanos. It makes sense you'd want to talk to her privately." "I don't want to talk to her at all." He hit the emergency stop button, and the elevator jerked to a halt. "She's my past, Grace. A past I walked away from because I refused to marry someone I didn't love just to cement business alliances." My heart hammered at the implication. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I see the way you're looking at me." He moved closer, caging me against the elevator wall. "Like you're already planning your escape. Already convincing yourself this thing between us doesn't matter. And I need you to know it does matter. You matter. I'm your employee. You're so much more than that, and you know it." His hand cupped my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. "These past 3 weeks, working with you, talking to you, learning how your mind works, it's been the best part of my day, Grace. The only real part of my day. Gabriel, I'm falling for you." The admission was rough, almost angry. "I know it's too soon. I know it's complicated and messy and potentially disastrous. But I'm falling for you. And I need to know if there's any chance you feel the same way." My breath caught. This was insane. 3 weeks ago, I'd been crying over Brian's betrayal. Now I was in a stopped elevator with my boss, my dangerous, complicated, impossibly attractive boss, who'd just admitted to falling for me. "This is a terrible idea," I whispered. "I know. You're my boss. There are workplace policies. I'll transfer you to a different department, put you under someone else's supervision. The Castanos are threatening you. Isabella just walked back into your life. Everything is complicated right now." "It'll always be complicated, Grace." His thumb traced my lower lip. "That's my world. Complicated, dangerous, filled with people like the Castanos and Isabella who want to use me for their own ends. But you walked into my life looking for nothing more than a paycheck, and somehow you've become the one thing I can't afford to lose. I should have been rational, should have listed all the reasons this wouldn't work. Instead, I grabbed his tie and pulled him down to kiss me. It was different from the kiss at the club, less about discovery and more about claiming. His hands gripped my waist, pulling me flush against him as I tangled my fingers in his hair, messing up his perfect style. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were nearly black with desire. "I'm falling for you too," I admitted. "Even though you're controlling and impossible and you organize everything alphabetically, including your Chinese food containers." He smiled against my lips. "You're chaotic and stubborn, and you deliberately make my coffee 1 degree too hot. Someone has to keep you on your toes. You certainly do that." He pressed his forehead to mine. "Grace, I need you to understand what you're signing up for. My world isn't safe. Being with me means being associated with things you might not approve of. People who are dangerous. Situations that could put you at risk. I'm a grown woman, Gabriel. I can make my own choices about risk. Even so. His grip tightened on my waist. Promise me something. If things get too dangerous, if the Castanos or anyone else threatens you because of me, you'll walk away. You'll save yourself. That's not how this works. Promise me, Grace. I pulled back enough to look at him. Only if you promise the same. If keeping me safe means pushing me away, you won't do it. We face whatever comes together, or not at all. He studied my face for a long moment, and I could see him warring with the need to protect me and the desire to keep me close. Together, he finally agreed, even when it's messy and chaotic and everything I normally avoid. Especially then. I kissed him again, softer this time. Now start this elevator before building security comes looking for us. He reached for the button, but paused. Isabella, is your past. I get it. I straightened his tie, smoothing the wrinkles I'd created. But she's still upstairs in your office, and she clearly has information about the Castanos. You should talk to her. Not alone. His voice was firm. If I'm talking to her, you're there. I'm not giving her ammunition to use against me, and I'm not giving you reasons to doubt what I just said. The gesture meant more than he probably realized. Okay, together. We rode the elevator back up in comfortable silence, his hand linked with mine. When the doors opened, Isabella was perched on my desk, examining her perfect manicure. Finished with your little emergency? She asked, her eyes lingering on our joined hands. How sweet. Gabriel's finally found someone who'll tolerate his controlling nature. Miss Mitchell will be joining our conversation, Gabriel said coolly, not releasing my hand. Whatever you have to say about the Castanos, she needs to hear it. Isabella's expression hardened. Since when do you include your secretaries in business discussions? Since now. He led me toward his office. Either you're here to help, or you're here to manipulate the situation to your father's advantage. Which is it, Isabella? She stood, her movements calculated and graceful. Always so suspicious, Caro. I'm here because despite how we ended, I don't want to see you destroyed by the Castanos. They're more dangerous than you realize. Then talk. Gabriel settled behind his desk, pulling a chair beside him for me. A deliberate choice that put us side by side instead of across from each other. What do you know? Isabella's green eyes moved between us, and I saw calculation there, strategy forming. She was trying to figure out how to use me, how to drive a wedge between Gabriel and whatever this was growing between us. She had no idea how stubborn I could be when I wanted something. And I wanted Gabriel Stone. Danger, complications, and all. Isabella settled into the chair across from us with practiced elegance, crossing her legs and arranging her dress with the precision of someone used to being watched. I noticed Gabriel didn't offer her coffee, didn't ask if she needed anything. The small rejection gave me a petty satisfaction I probably shouldn't have felt. The Castanos aren't just pressuring you to help with one shipment, she began, her accent making each word sound musical despite the gravity of what she was saying. They're trying to take over your entire import operation. The shipment is a test. If you agree, they'll slowly infiltrate every aspect of your business until you're working for them instead of yourself. Gabriel's hand tightened on mine under the desk. How do you know this? Because they approached my father with the same proposition 3 years ago. Her expression was grim. He refused. They destroyed 2 of his warehouses, framed one of his managers for embezzlement, and nearly bankrupted him before he finally agreed to a partnership. Now he's little more than a figurehead while they run his operations. I felt Gabriel go rigid beside me. Why didn't you tell me this before? You made it very clear when you broke our engagement that you wanted nothing to do with my family or their business. Her voice carried an edge of old hurt. I respected that, Gabriel. But this is different. The Castanos are targeting everyone who went legitimate. They see the clean businesses as easy marks, established infrastructure, legitimate fronts, and owners who have too much to lose to fight back effectively. There has to be a way to stop them, I said, surprising myself by speaking. Both of them looked at me, and I forced myself to continue despite Isabella's dismissive expression. You can't be the only ones they're targeting. If you work together with the other families who've gone legitimate— The families don't trust each other, Isabella interrupted. That's what the Castanos are counting on. We're all so busy protecting our individual territories that we can't see the bigger threat. Then make them see it. I looked at Gabriel. You said your grandfather built this company on relationships. Use those relationships now. Call everyone the Castanos have approached, show them the pattern, create a united front. Gabriel was staring at me with something like wonder. That could actually work. It won't be that simple, Isabella warned. The Castanos have enforcers, connections in law enforcement, politicians on their payroll. Even united, we'd be fighting an uphill battle. But at least you'd be fighting. I squeezed Gabriel's hand. Better than slowly surrendering pieces of what you've built until there's nothing left. For the first time since she'd arrived, Isabella looked at me with something other than dismissal. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone temporary. Someone Gabriel would tire of once the novelty wore off. Her smile was sharp. He has a type, beautiful, docile, willing to mold themselves to fit his life. You don't seem to fit any of those criteria except the first. Good thing I'm not trying to fit anyone's criteria. I met her gaze steadily. I'm just trying to help someone I care about. How noble. But there was no warmth in her voice. Just be careful, darling. Gabriel's world eats up people like you. All that optimism and naivety, it won't survive contact with reality. Isabella, Gabriel's voice was cold. We appreciate the information, but the commentary on my personal life is unnecessary. She stood, smoothing her dress. Of course. I'll have my father send over the list of families the Castanos have approached. Perhaps you can work your magic and unite them. She paused at the door. But Gabriel, be careful who you trust. The Castanos have informants everywhere, even in places you'd never suspect. After she left, silence filled the office. Gabriel released my hand and stood, moving to the windows like he always did when he needed to think. She's right about one thing, he said finally. My world will try to destroy you. Already is trying, if you count Isabella's little performance. I've survived worse than a jealous ex-fiancé. This isn't about jealousy. He turned to face me. She's trying to protect me in her own twisted way. And she's right to worry. Getting involved with me puts a target on your back, Grace. Then we'll just have to make sure I'm not an easy target. I stood, moving to him. Gabriel, I'm not fragile. I'm not going to shatter the first time things get difficult. I know you're not fragile. His hands framed my face. But you're also not made for this world. You believe in following the rules, in doing things the right way. My world operates in the gray spaces between legal and illegal, moral and expedient. Then teach me. I covered his hands with mine. Show me how to navigate those gray spaces. Or better yet, let me show you that sometimes chaos and improvisation work better than rigid control. He smiled despite himself. You really think your chaos can solve this? I think your control is what's keeping you isolated. You're so busy trying to manage every variable that you can't see the solutions that require trust and collaboration. I pulled his hands down, but didn't release them. Tomorrow, we start calling the families. We build that united front, and we do it together, combining your strategy with my improvisation. This is insane. Completely. I stretched up to kiss him. But when has that stopped us? The next 2 weeks were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and tense negotiations. Gabriel reached out to every family head he knew who'd tried to go legitimate, and slowly, painfully, we built a coalition. It wasn't easy. Decades of mistrust and competition didn't disappear overnight. But the threat of the Castanos proved stronger than old grudges. I discovered I had a talent for this world I'd never expected. Where Gabriel was all stern authority, I could make people laugh, put them at ease, find common ground between enemies. We became a team. His control and my chaos balancing each other, complementing in ways that surprised us both. But we should have listened to Isabella's warning about informants. It was a Friday evening, 3 weeks after Isabella's visit. We'd just finished a conference call with the last holdout family, finally convincing them to join our alliance against the Castanos. Gabriel had opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving, and we were celebrating, really celebrating, for the first time since this nightmare had started. To chaos and control, he said, raising his glass to mine. To terrible ideas that somehow work out. I clinked my glass against his. We were laughing about something. I don't even remember what. When his office door opened without warning, Marco Castano stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 men I didn't recognize. But it was the person behind them who made my blood run cold. Vincent Castano. And beside him, her hand tucked into his arm like they were attending a society event, was my former roommate, Jessica. The same Jessica who'd slept with Brian. The same Jessica I'd lived with for 2 years before discovering her betrayal. The same Jessica who'd apologized profusely, claiming she never meant to hurt me, that she'd made a terrible mistake. "Surprise," she said, her smile sharp and triumphant. "Did you really think you could build a coalition without us knowing every single move?" Gabriel moved in front of me instantly, his body a shield. "How did you get past security?" "Your head of security has a gambling problem," Marco said pleasantly. "We helped him with his debts. He's been very cooperative about providing access codes and schedules." My mind was reeling. Jessica. Jessica had been feeding information to the Castanos. But how? Why? As if reading my mind, she stepped forward. "It was easy, really. You're so predictable, Grace. I knew when you got this job. Knew you'd latch onto your handsome boss just like you latched onto Brian. All I had to do was get close to Vincent. Let him know what you were planning. Every late-night conversation, every strategy session, every family you contacted. I knew it all because you told me. I haven't talked to you in months." My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "No, but you've been talking to Maya." Jessica's smile widened. "Your best friend who tells me everything because she thinks we made amends. Who has drinks with me twice a week and shares every detail of your new life." The betrayal cut deeper than anything Brian had done. Maya. My best friend had been unknowingly feeding information to Jessica, who'd been feeding it to the Castanos. "This ends now," Gabriel said, his voice deadly calm. "Grace has nothing to do with our business. Let her leave." "Oh, but she has everything to do with it." Vincent Castano stepped forward, young and handsome and absolutely terrifying. "She's the reason you've been so difficult, Moretti. The reason you've been fighting us instead of accepting the inevitable. Remove the distraction, and you'll see reason. Touch her, and I'll kill you." Gabriel's voice was flat, matter of fact. "I'll hunt down everyone you've ever cared about and make them disappear. That's not a threat, Vincent, it's a promise." Marco laughed. Such passion. See, that's the problem with going legitimate. You forget how to calculate risk versus reward. You're outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and out of options. You'll work with us, or we'll destroy everything you've built. Starting with her. Time seemed to slow. I saw Vincent's hand move toward his jacket, saw Gabriel tense to lunge, saw Jessica's triumphant smile. Then the window behind Gabriel's desk exploded inward. What happened next was chaos. Real chaos. Not the organized kind I'd been joking about for weeks. Men in tactical gear swarmed through the broken window on ropes, moving with military precision. Gunfire erupted, deafening in the enclosed space, and Gabriel tackled me to the ground, his body covering mine as glass and plaster rained down around us. I heard Marco Castano screaming, heard footsteps running, heard Jessica's shocked shriek. Then silence, broken only by the ringing in my ears. "Clear!" someone shouted. Gabriel lifted himself carefully, checking me for injuries with shaking hands. "Are you hurt? Grace, look at me. Are you hurt?" "I don't think so." I was trembling, shock setting in. "What, who?" "FBI." A woman in tactical gear approached, lowering her weapon. "We've been building a case against the Castanos for 2 years. Your coalition meetings finally gave us enough evidence to move." She looked at Gabriel. "Mr. Stone, you've been under FBI protection since you refused their initial approach. We just couldn't tell you without compromising the operation." I looked at Gabriel, saw his own shock mirrored in his expression. "You didn't know?" "I had no idea." He pulled me against him, his heart racing beneath my cheek. They were protecting us without us knowing. The FBI agent, Agent Morrison, she introduced herself, explained while her team secured the Castanos and Jessica. They'd been monitoring everything, waiting for the Castanos to make a move that would give them enough evidence for a RICO case. Our coalition building had accelerated their timeline, forcing them to act before someone got killed. "Your friend Maya is fine," Morrison added, seeing my expression. She had no idea Jessica was using her. "We'll need statements from both of you about the information sharing." As they led the Castanos away in handcuffs, Jessica caught my eye. All her triumph was gone, replaced by fear and regret. "I didn't know they were going to hurt you," she said desperately. "Grace, I swear, I just wanted to get back at you for always being so perfect." "I was never perfect," I interrupted, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "I was just trying to survive. Maybe if you'd spent less time resenting me and more time building your own life, you wouldn't be in handcuffs right now." After they were all gone, after the FBI had taken our statements and promised to be in touch, after the building maintenance had covered the broken window with temporary boards, Gabriel and I were finally alone. We stood in his destroyed office, surrounded by broken glass and bullet holes, and I started laughing. "This is not a normal reaction to attempted murder," Gabriel said, but he was smiling. "Nothing about us is normal." I moved into his arms, needing the solid reality of him. "We met in a club. I became your assistant. We fell for each other while fighting the mob, and now the FBI has arrested everyone who was trying to kill us. If this were a novel, no one would believe it." "Grace." He tilted my chin up, his expression serious. "I almost lost you tonight, if the FBI hadn't moved when they did. But they did. I cut him off. We're safe. The Castanos are gone. We survived. Together." "Together," I agreed. "Chaos and control. Turns out we make a pretty good team." He kissed me then, deep and claiming, and I tasted relief and fear and love all mixed together. We'd survived. Against all odds, against every reasonable expectation, we'd survived. Now we just had to figure out how to build a life from the wreckage. The aftermath was almost worse than the crisis itself. The FBI investigation took 3 months. 3 months of depositions, testimony, meetings with prosecutors who wanted every detail of every interaction with the Castanos. 3 months of watching the news dissect Gabriel's family history, questioning whether Stone Industries had really gone legitimate, or if it was all an elaborate front. Through it all, Gabriel held himself together with that iron control I'd come to know so well. He testified with calm precision, provided documentation proving every transaction for the past 5 years had been legal, weathered the media storm with the same unyielding composure he brought to everything. But I saw the cracks, saw them in the way his hands shook when he thought I wasn't looking, in the nightmares that woke him at 3 a.m, in the obsessive way he checked and rechecked security protocols. I'd moved into his penthouse 2 days after the FBI raid. He'd asked me to stay one night, just so he could know I was safe, and I'd never left. My chaotic presence invaded his perfectly ordered space, books stacked haphazardly on his minimalist coffee table, coffee mugs in the sink, shoes kicked off randomly instead of lined up in the closet. He pretended to hate it, but I'd caught him smiling at my mess more than once. "You're reorganizing my bookshelf again," I said one Saturday morning, watching him from the kitchen where I was attempting to make pancakes. The batter had somehow ended up on the ceiling. Don't ask me how. It was organized by publication date. You changed it to color. He didn't look up from his task. Color-coding books is a crime against literature, Grace. Color-coding books is aesthetic, and you know it. I flipped a pancake, nearly dropping it on the floor. Besides, you love my chaos. Admit it. I tolerate your chaos. But he was smiling. There's a difference. You love my chaos, I insisted, abandoning the pancakes to wrap my arms around him from behind. Just like I love your control. We balance each other. He turned in my embrace, his hand settling on my waist. Is that what we're doing? Balancing? Among other things. I stretched up to kiss him. Also, I think the pancakes are burning. You think? He looked over my shoulder at the smoke beginning to rise from the pan. Grace, the entire kitchen is going to... The smoke alarm went off, shrill and insistent. Gabriel grabbed the pan, tossed it in the sink, and turned on the water while I frantically waved a dish towel at the detector. By the time we'd silenced the alarm, the kitchen was filled with smoke and the smell of burnt batter. We looked at each other and burst out laughing. "This is your chaos," Gabriel said, pulling me against him despite the disaster around us. Burnt pancakes and smoke detectors and absolute mayhem. And you love it. God help me, I do. He kissed the top of my head. I love all of it. I love you. The words still had the power to steal my breath. I love you too. Even when you reorganize my books. Especially when I reorganize your books. His expression grew serious. Grace, we need to talk about what happens when the investigation ends. I'd been dreading this conversation. You mean about me working for you? The FBI cleared both of us completely. Stone Industries' reputation is recovering. The coalition we built is actually working. Families are cooperating in ways they never did before. He pulled back to look at me. But you can't be my assistant anymore. The workplace relationship is too complicated. Too much of a liability. My heart sank. So I'm fired? Promoted. He smiled at my confusion. I want you to head our new community relations division, working with the families, maintaining the coalition, handling the diplomatic aspects of keeping everyone cooperating. It's what you're good at, Grace. Finding common ground, making people trust each other. You'd report to the board, not to me. Separate departments, separate professional lives. But together in every other way. I was starting to smile. Completely together in every other way. His hands cupped my face. I want to do this right, Grace. No more sneaking around, no more blurred lines between professional and personal. I want you as my partner in life, not my employee. That sounds perfect. I kissed him softly. When do I start? Monday. But first. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and my breath caught. I know it's fast. I know we've only been together for 4 months. I know by every reasonable measure this is insane. Gabriel. But I also know I've never been more certain of anything in my life. He opened the box to reveal a stunning emerald-cut diamond on a platinum band. Grace Mitchell, you walked into my life and turned everything upside down. You made me remember how to improvise, how to trust, how to let go of control when it matters. You're my chaos and my calm, my disaster and my salvation. Will you marry me? I should have said yes immediately. Should have thrown myself into his arms and celebrated. Instead, I took the box from him and set it carefully on the counter. Ask me again in a year, I said. His expression cycled through shock, hurt, and finally understanding. You want to wait. I want to be sure this isn't just adrenaline and trauma bonding and the intensity of everything we've been through. I took his hands in mine. Gabriel, I love you. I want to spend my life with you. But I also want to do this right. Build a foundation that's about more than surviving crises together. I want boring Saturday mornings and routine weekday dinners and all the mundane reality that comes with actually being in a relationship. You want to test if we work without the drama. I want to prove that we work because of us, not despite circumstances. I squeezed his hands. Ask me again in a year, after we've had time to just be together without FBI investigations and mob threats and smoke alarms. If you still want to marry me, then I will. His voice was certain. A year from now, 5 years from now, 50 years from now, I'll always want to marry you, Grace. Then waiting won't hurt. I pulled him down for a kiss. Besides, gives you time to get used to my chaos permanently invading your life. Bold of you to assume I'm not already used to it. But he was smiling. The year that followed was everything I'd hoped for and more. We learned each other in the quiet moments, morning coffee routines and evening walks, arguments over whose turn it was to do dishes, lazy Sunday afternoons reading side by side. We learned how to fight fair, how to compromise when our natural tendencies clashed, how to support each other's careers without letting them consume our relationship. I thrived in my new role, building bridges between families who'd been enemies for generations. Gabriel's business continued to grow, completely legitimate now, with transparent practices that made the FBI's final report read like a love letter to corporate ethics. And slowly, we built something real. Something that wasn't based on danger or crisis, but on choosing each other every single day. It was a Friday night, exactly 1 year after his first proposal. Gabriel had taken me to Eclipse, the same club where we'd met, claiming he wanted to recreate our first night together. Except this time, he said, leading me onto the dance floor. I know your name. And I know you're a control freak who organizes his socks by color. And you're a chaos demon who somehow got pancake batter on the ceiling last week. He pulled me close as the music shifted to something slow. Marry me, Grace. I pulled back to look at him. That's it? That's your big romantic proposal? I tried romantic last year. You turned me down. But he was smiling. This time I'm being direct. Marry me. Move past the year of testing and proving and building foundations. Marry me because you love me and I love you and we both know this works. You're supposed to be on one knee. I'm supposed to do a lot of things. He stopped dancing, right there in the middle of the club, and dropped to one knee anyway. The crowd around us noticed, phones appearing to capture the moment. Grace Mitchell, will you marry my controlling, organized, impossibly perfect life and make it beautifully chaotic? I was laughing and crying at the same time. Yes. Obviously, yes. He slipped the ring on my finger. The same ring he'd offered a year ago, kept safe and waiting. When he stood and kissed me, the club erupted in applause. This is insane, I said against his lips. Completely. His arms tightened around me. But that's us. Chaos and control, disaster and perfection, everything we shouldn't be but somehow are. Together, always together. He kissed me again. Though, for the record, if you get pancake batter on the ceiling of our house again, I'm staging an intervention. Our house? Well, I assume my fiancé will want to redecorate the penthouse. His smile was soft. Make it ours instead of mine. Add your chaos to my control and see what we create. Probably burnt pancakes and reorganized bookshelves. Sounds perfect. And standing there in the club where it all started, surrounded by strangers celebrating our moment, I realized he was right. We were perfect. Not in spite of our differences, but because of them. His control gave my chaos direction. My chaos taught his control to bend. Together, we were exactly what we both needed. I love you, I said, the words feeling inadequate for everything I felt. I love you too. Gabriel pulled me closer, swaying to music we barely heard. My beautiful disaster. My impossible perfectionist. Forever? Forever, I agreed. And this time, I meant it with absolute certainty. We'd survived attempted murder, FBI investigations, and burnt pancakes. We could survive anything, as long as we survived it together.